In the middle of a crowded street, a small dog suddenly lunged forward, growling, and bit hard into the arm of a man who was standing right next to an old woman's wheelchair, making people scream as everyone gathered around in shock, because just a few seconds later, they discovered what the man had been hiding inside his sleeve. Mrs. Ruth Anderson, 78 years old, lived in Denver, Colorado. She was a woman with silver hair, a petite figure, a face full of wrinkles, yet her eyes still shone brightly and sharply. All her life, she worked as a nurse in a large hospital in the city, spending nearly 50 years caring for patients, wiping away their sweat, becoming a familiar face in the neighborhood. Until 3 years ago, she suffered a stroke and had to rely on a wheelchair. However, no one had ever heard her complain. Every day, she would wheel herself out to a small park near her house, reading books or simply enjoying the sun, and every morning, exactly at 8 a.m., Mrs. Ruth would roll her wheelchair onto the sidewalk and stop in front of an old coffee shop called Joe's Coffee, ordering an iced coffee with less sugar, and she always had a faithful companion beside her. His name was Max, a German shepherd, large and strong, with black and tan fur, ears always standing upright, intelligent and alert eyes. Despite his size, Max had a very special temperament because he hated strangers coming near Mrs. Ruth, and whenever someone stepped closer than a few feet, Max would immediately growl, his fur standing on end, barking loudly, sometimes even lunging forward as if to scare them away. People once advised Mrs. Ruth that she should have Max trained to be less aggressive, fearing that he might bite someone one day, but she simply smiled and said, "He's only protecting me." Max knows who's good and who's not, which made everyone think she was just joking, because after all, how could a dog, no matter how big, possibly know a person's intentions, right? But then, certain incidents began to happen that made people realize Max might not have been wrong at all. That day, the sun was blazing hot, and Denver was busier than usual because it was tourist season. Mrs. Ruth wheeled herself to Joe's Coffee like she always did. Max walked close to the right side of the wheelchair, occasionally glancing at her, his tail swaying gently, while Mr. Joe, the coffee vendor, around 60 years old, with gray hair and thick glasses, bent down to pat Max on the head and said, "Good morning, ma'am, and good morning to your big bodyguard," which made Mrs. Ruth laugh and reply, "Max has been good today. He hasn't scared anyone yet." Mr. Joe chuckled, handed her the iced coffee with less sugar, then went back to work, while Mrs. Ruth sat on the sidewalk, sipping her coffee, watching the busy traffic, while Max sat beside her feet, ears erect, eyes constantly scanning as if he was always ready to protect her. About 10 minutes later, a man appeared, around 40 years old, thin, wearing a gray hoodie pulled low over his face, his hands buried deep in his pockets, walking slowly before stopping right next to Mrs. Ruth's wheelchair, making Mrs. Ruth look up and smile gently, asking, "Is there something I can help you with, young man?" But the man didn't answer, his eyes fixed on the small purse hanging on the side of Mrs. Ruth's wheelchair. A chill ran down Mrs. Ruth's spine. Max began to growl softly, the fur on his neck standing up, his dark brown eyes locked on the man's sleeve, making Mrs. Ruth quickly reach out to stroke Max's back, whispering, "Shh, it's okay, Max." But Max didn't calm down, and suddenly, the man bent closer to the wheelchair, thrusting his right hand straight into Mrs. Ruth's purse, everything happening so quickly that no one even understood what was going on. Immediately, Max leapt forward, growling fiercely, and clamped his powerful jaws onto the man's sleeve, making the man scream, "Ah, let go, crazy dog!" As people rushed over, Mr. Joe ran out from his coffee stand shouting, "What's going on here?" There was no blood, but the deep growl of Max echoed, leaving everyone stunned, while the man struggled to pull his arm free from Max's powerful jaws. But Max only bit down harder, and at that exact moment, something hidden inside the man's sleeve fell to the ground. Everything seemed to explode the moment a black object fell from the man's sleeve and hit the pavement with a sharp metallic clink. People nearby gasped and stepped back instinctively, eyes wide with fear. It was a folding knife. its steel blade glinting dangerously under the blazing sunlight. For a few seconds, the entire street seemed frozen in time, silent and breathless, as if even the city itself was holding its breath. The man stood there motionless, his hoodie still pulled low over his forehead, his face pale as chalk, beads of sweat running down his temples. His eyes darted wildly from side to side, searching for a way out, but he was surrounded. Mr. Joe, his face flushed and eyes blazing with shock, shouted, "He's got a knife! What was he planning to do to Mrs. Ruth?" His voice cracked as he spoke, trembling with both fear and anger. Meanwhile, Mrs. Ruth trembled uncontrollably, gripping the armrests of her wheelchair so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her breath came in short, shaky gasps, and for a moment, it looked like she might faint right there on the sidewalk. People crowded closer, some yelling for help, others pulling out their phones to dial 911. A few brave souls stepped forward to restrain the man, who began to struggle and curse, trying to yank his arm free. But Max still refused to let go. His powerful jaws were locked firmly onto the man's sleeve, teeth bared, a low, furious growl rumbling in his chest. His eyes burned with fierce determination, as if he would rather face any danger than let harm come to the woman he loved. Within minutes, the sound of police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder and closer until 2 patrol cars skidded to a stop nearby. A young officer rushed over, crouched beside Mrs. Ruth, and asked gently, "Ma'am, are you okay?" But Mrs. Ruth simply shook her head, her eyes still locked on Max as if drawing strength from him. The officer glanced from Max to the knife gleaming on the ground, then back to Mrs. Ruth, and said in a quiet, solemn voice, "Ma'am, it's very possible that this dog just saved your life today." It turned out the man wasn't just trying to steal her purse. He was the same suspect wanted for a string of violent robberies against elderly people in the area, known for threatening his victims with a knife and escaping into the crowds. Max, with an instinct sharper than any human's, had sensed the danger from the very beginning and acted without a moment's hesitation to protect Mrs. Ruth. News quickly spread throughout the neighborhood. The local newspaper published a photo of Max, the large German Shepherd, standing proudly next to Mrs. Ruth with a big headline reading, "5-year-old German Shepherd saves 78-year-old woman from armed robber." Mr. Joe, from that day on, always kept a small water bowl in front of his coffee stand with a little sign that read, "For Max, the hero of the street." While people in the neighborhood began visiting Mrs. Ruth more often, all looking at Max with eyes full of affection and gratitude. Mrs. Ruth gently stroked Max's fur, her voice trembling as she whispered, "I've always said, Max knows who's good and who isn't, and today, he proved that even a dog can have the heart of a true hero." Max let out a soft whimper, rested his head against her hand, and wagged his tail lightly as if saying, "Don't worry, Mom, I'll always protect you." Because sometimes, heroes aren't giant muscular men, but a German shepherd, willing to risk his life to protect the person he loves most. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button on this video. And if you'd love to hear more amazing stories, don't forget to subscribe to SoulPaw Stories 5. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video.